As we approach Easter, I'm glad you're taking the time to prepare your heart and your mind for this season of the year. Because really, as Christians, this is the most monumental part of the year. It's really at the core of our faith, the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Really, everything we believe revolves around that. And so I'm glad you're taking the time. This week, we're going to be exploring the names of Jesus, some of the different words that were used and titles given to Jesus to just describe him and who he is. And really what I hope it does is it helps you to see Jesus maybe in a new light, or to maybe have a greater understanding of who he is. And really what it spurs in you is a desire to draw near to Jesus and to worship him in a greater way. And so I hope that as Easter comes, you just have a greater sense of awe and wonder as we celebrate that day, as we gather together as a community for that day of the year. And so I'm excited at what some of our staff and volunteers have in store for you over this next week. We got a great lineup for you, and I'm just going to get us started today. And so what I'm going to talk about is the whole idea of Jesus as the shepherd. And so in the Old Testament, as you look at descriptions, passages in the Old Testament, one of the phrases that comes up on multiple occasions to describe God is that of a shepherd. You can think of places like Psalm 23 that say, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Or you can think of Isaiah 53 that says, "We all like sheep have gone astray." And so that picture of God being the shepherd, of us being a sheep, that it's something that you can see in the Old Testament. It was something that really I think is just part of the culture of the Israelites, and that's why you see that, because they were very well aware of shepherds, sheep, what those dynamics were, the things that happened. And so it's not surprising that as we turn to the New Testament, in John chapter 10, verse 11, Jesus describes himself as a shepherd. And so in verse 11, he says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." And this is one of the 7 statements John says in his gospel. There's 7 I am statements, and this is one of them. I am the good shepherd. And now I know when you hear that idea of Jesus being the good shepherd, maybe what comes to mind is like picturing Jesus holding this little lamb. You're like, oh, like how cute is that? Jesus and this lamb. Okay, no, watch that out of your mind. When you think of a shepherd, being a shepherd was a tough job. It was physically demanding. It was hard work. It was something that was sometimes dangerous. I mean, this was not something people just jumped into. It was tough. In today's world, I think of like a construction worker after working all day, and they're just dirty from head to toe, just super tired because they've been working out in the heat, and they're just ready to call it a day. That's like a shepherd, except even at night, he didn't get to call it a day. He still had to be on it at night. At night, one of the things that they would do is they would gather up all the sheep. And if there was a alcove of rocks, if that's the right word, or there's like a cave, they would put all the sheep into that cave to keep them there. And then the shepherd, he would sleep at the entrance. And really the whole point of that was if there was an intruder trying to sneak in and steal a sheep, they had to go through the shepherd. If there was a bear or a wolf who was hungry, looking for some lamb chops, well, they had to go through the shepherd. That the shepherd was there to protect the sheep, to keep the sheep from wandering out, as well as to keep these dangers from wandering in. And I love that picture because, again, you can think about Jesus as that good shepherd, that's part of it, that he's there to protect the sheep. And as it says, he's willing to do this at the cost of his own life, that he willingly lays down his life because of his great love for his sheep, for those who follow him and call him their Lord and their Savior. And what's interesting is you don't just see Jesus' love through how he willingly laid down his life for his sheep, for his followers, but you also see it through the care that he gives them, through how he knows his sheep, and through how he seeks to lead his sheep. And John chapter 10 again, just earlier in this passage in verse 3 and 4, it says, "The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice." Sheep, they're generally pretty obedient animals, and they quickly learn to recognize the voice of their shepherd. Shepherds, sometimes they'll go before their sheep, kind of lead them, and they'll sometimes have a shepherd's pipe that they'll play. And sheep learn to recognize the pitch of that pipe that they play, or the sound of their shepherd, that they learn to recognize it so they can follow his direction, follow his lead as he seeks to take them somewhere or to lead them out of danger. And what's also interesting is at the time of Jesus, the typical size of a flock of sheep was about 100. And so in a size of 100, the shepherd would know every single sheep. He'd know them by name. He probably was the one who named each of these sheep. He knows the sheep who are, the ones who are a little too curious for their own good. He knows the sheep who sometimes wander into trouble or get distracted. He knows the sheep that, just all the different things that make each sheep who they are. And I love that picture because that's Jesus. He knows you and I so intimately, and part of that is because of his great love for you and I. And yet he also wants to lead us like a shepherd leads his sheep. And again, I said sheep are usually obedient. They usually follow. And yet for us, as his sheep, as his followers, how well do we heed his voice? How much are we listening to his voice versus the voices in culture or our friends or maybe the people on social media that we follow? Are we really following the voice of our shepherd, seeking to heed his call, to follow him wherever he calls us to go, to do what he calls us to do? And so I hope today you're encouraged to draw near to our good shepherd who willingly laid down his life for you and for me. And that's really, again, what we celebrate during Easter. And I hope this gives you a call as you begin this week of Easter on Palm Sunday to spend some time with the Lord and to really ask, how well am I heeding his voice today?